Citizen U presents The12.
We're the two teachers.
Today we are here to deliberate, to cram for your exam in 12 sessions.
Today's finding, the foundational documents.
And we've talked about essential court cases. We've gone through all the essential knowledge points. But let's not forget there are 9 foundational documents that will show up on this test in multiple choice. And clearly they'll be used in our argumentative FRQ.
Argument essay. It's not argumentative. It's argument essay FRQ.
Wait, are you picking a fight with me now?
Well, it sounds like you were picking a fight.
This sounds like an argumentative session.
I don't want to make this argumentative. You were. So let's keep it with the argument.
Okay.
The foundational docs, you're absolutely right. There are 9 foundational docs that students should know. So we're going to run through those 9 and just tell you real brief snippets of what you should know about
So
each
these
9.
are the primary documents that you should all know. Just, what do you call them? Just a little snippet. Not sure what a snippet is. I would say the essentials. Andy, first we must look at Federalist 10, one of this course's all-time favorite documents. Federalist 10, Madison and a Large Republic.
A large republic is necessary in a democratic republic. The idea that in a larger geographic place with a larger population, you'll have factions balance each other out. They were very concerned about the tyranny of the majority. And they thought that if you have a larger population, a larger geographic area, and let's say a house district, that those different factions would prevent one faction becoming tyrannical and oppressing the minority.
So these are those essays to try to convince the states to ratify the new Constitution. And Madison is addressing the issue of democracy versus republics, large versus small, large republics. It's pluralism, competing groups. Andy, let's go to the second document, and that is Brutus 1.
Well, remember, there was a really healthy argument about whether the Constitution should be ratified, whether it gave too much central power to the national government, whether it was going to protect federalism, and essentially how they were electing representatives, whether it was actually empowering the people.
So Brutus 1 is that antithesis. It's the argument against the Federalist Papers. We're arguing against this large republic. The anti-Federalists wanted a smaller, more agricultural, small units of democracy, like democracies had been in history in the past.
Right, and remember the anti-Federalists were also very suspicious of putting too much power in a single executive.
Yes.
I mean, the Revolutionary War was a war against a single executive, a powerful central government, and the anti-Federalists were trying to articulate that perspective of being suspicious about too much power in one person or one place.
Andy, let's see what snippet we have for the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all are created equal with certain inalienable rights.
So you just hit on a key core principle of American government in a democracy. It's popular sovereignty. And that's the idea.
Consent of the governed.
Consent of the governed. And that's popular sovereignty, which is embodied in the original Constitution in a directly elected House of Representatives. That's where you would see ideals of the Declaration in the actual Constitution.
So the Declaration of Independence, it's a lawyer's brief for independence, but it's really our promissory note. We want these ideals someday. It's our creed. It's what we fight for. Well, let's look at the Articles of Confederation.
But, I mean, just sticking with the Declaration.
More snippets?
Well, it's a connection with the other document. That's the idea of the Bill of Rights. The idea that the Bill of Rights was a protection of those essential liberties that were first mentioned in the Declaration.
The Articles of Confederation. You know, sometimes failure is a good thing. The Articles of Confederation was our first government charter, Andy, and it didn't work. Why didn't it work?
Well, it worked on some things. We defeated a superpower. Oh. We established the Northwest Territories.
That's more than a snippet.
But it did not. The Articles of Confederation did not give the central government enough power to create a stronger economic union between the states.
Couldn't pay for a standing army. Remember the Shays Rebellion?
Shays Rebellion is a key thing to know, that the idea there was no central army or states weren't powerful enough to put down large rebellions. And that's one of the reasons why the Articles failed, was the central government was not strong enough.
So difficult to change. It required a unanimity of all 13 states.
Right. All states were equal in the Congress. There was every state had equal power. So they got rid of the Articles of Confederation in favor of the U.S. Constitution.
Oh, the U.S. Constitution is certainly a document you should know. In fact, in most of our argumentative essays, I'd be hard-pressed not to talk about the U.S. Constitution. And it is our blueprint of the U.S. government.
Right. And this is a key point, Dan, that in the argument essay, remember, they're going to lay out 3 documents in the argument essay. Constitution, we suspect, will usually be one of those 3 documents. Even if it's not, you can use the Constitution, including the Bill of Rights.
Yes.
And you can use it if the Constitution is listed as one of the 3 documents. You can use the Constitution or amendments.
Twice.
You can use it twice.
That's a good snippet. How about Federalist 51? More Federalist Papers, Andy. This one is about a key principle found in our Constitution, checks and balances.
Also known as separation of powers. Then Federalist 51 was describing how the 3 different branches of the federal government would check and balance each other so that no one branch would have too much power in the system.
If men were angels, we wouldn't need a government. But boy, I don't see no wings. And so the anthropology of our founders was we have to check the inherent abuses that governments have. Federalist 51, separation of powers. I love that. Speaking of love, I love civil rights, and I love MLK Jr.'s letter from a Birmingham jail.
Right. So this is a foundational document. It's the most recent of the foundational documents from the 20th century. It can certainly be connected with the civil rights movement, the idea of activism that followed the litigation of Brown versus the Board of Education. You saw activism, which then created legislation like the Civil Rights Act of '64, the Voting Rights Act of 1965. It's also a good reminder that the letter from Birmingham Jail was Dr. King's attempt to kind of put a foundation of the civil rights back onto the Declaration of Independence and those founding ideals, which are referenced in the letter from a Birmingham jail. It's also his attempt to reach out and build coalitions and grassroots organizations. It was very much an effort to bring that Northern White Alliance into supporting his causes for the civil rights activism.
Well, it's a great document about political participation because Dr. King is encouraging people to act now. Can't wait anymore. The time to engage is now. That's more than a snippet. That's a great lesson for today. Speaking of more lessons, Andy, more Federalist Papers on our docket. Federalist 70. This is Hamilton's look at the presidency.
The president, what we call the single executive. The idea that only one person would be the chief executive, and that one person would have what Hamilton described as what's the energy or the energetic executive.
The energetic president.
And that's Hamilton's vision that actually has become true, that the idea that the president, even though the powers listed for the president, what we call the formal powers in Article 2's Constitution, those formal powers are limited, it seems like, but an energetic executive can go beyond the document and act when there's gaps.
So the enumerated powers of the president, not all that impressive, but Federalist 70 is presciently forecasting the day when a president can go outside of the Constitution using certain informal powers to do what is necessary. An energetic president. Boy, another Federalist paper that causes some giggling today is Federalist 78, when Hamilton talks about the least dangerous branch, the judiciary.
Well,
who's he kidding?
Federalist 78 is about Article 3 of the Constitution, the judicial branch. Article 3 says very little about the details of the judiciary, other than Congress can establish the judiciary, and there'll be a Supreme Court. And originally, the courts were envisioned to simply interpret the law. And you're right, Federalist 78 describes the courts as the least dangerous branch. But Federalist 78 also gives a preview of judicial review.
Yes, it does.
There's nothing in the Constitution that says the words judicial review. It's in Federalist 78. And certainly that becomes a reason why in Marbury versus Madison, the Supreme Court gave itself the power of judicial review. We also see in the Constitution, there's nothing that says that federal judges serve for life. But that is described actually in Federalist 78. It's one of the reasons why when we appoint Supreme Court and federal judges, they can't be fired, that they actually have a job for as long as they'd like to serve.
Ooh,
and that creates what's In Federalist 78, he calls the independent judiciary, the idea that judiciary can be an effective check on the legislative branch
Ooh,
and
what's
the
up,
executive
Doc?
branch.
These foundational documents, so important to understanding this course, and so important for you to do well on your test. We're the two teachers. No fancy words.
No fancy suits.
Plain talk about issues you need to know.
Just in time.